All right. So we are up and running, and a few computer glitches delayed us a bit, and some good conversation delayed us a bit. And I prefer one of those to the other. But it is time to get down to a little Torah study. And this week we are coming to the wonderful parasha of Chayei, which is most famous, of course, for dealing with the passage of Sarah, and then the finding of a bride for Isaac, and then the later half, or not half, but later section of Abraham's life. So that's sort of the view from the satellite picture. And when it comes to Sarah's passing, there's one topic that dominates the whole section. Not the eulogy, right? Not Abraham's weeping, although there is plenty of that. What's the biggest part of the narrative of her passing?
Getting a burial site.
Getting a burial site, right? Making the arrangements of where she's going to be buried. Not exactly what you might consider to be the makings of a great story. Most of us, when we recount the days after a loved one, we probably don't dwell on all of our meetings with the funeral director and going over all those things. We say we met, we made the arrangements, and then the burial, and then we focus on the burial, we focus on the Shiva, we focus on the eulogies. Really? The burial? This is going to take up our story time? Yes, and we're going to see that there are repercussions for this burial that continue to this very day. And let's go ahead and make sure we review the story so we know what it is we're talking about. Do I have any volunteers to read? Welcome back, Harriet. Page 127. We're right at the beginning.
Thank you.
No one's read.
Yeah, I know. It's.
I've been listening.
You know, I should just record you read the entire Torah, and then I can play each of the sections on demand. So page 127, this is chapter 23, and from verse 1.
Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life, came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her.
All right, so just real quick question. Where did she pass?
Well,
Hebron, right? Also known as Kiryat Arba and Hebron. Remember those names. Got them? Good. Onward.
Then Abraham rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien among you. Sell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial. And the Hittites replied to Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are the elect of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold his burial place from you for burying your dead.
All right, so what is he asking for? What's Abraham asking for? What's that? A burial site. So he wants a gift.
No.
He wants to buy a burial site, right? And what do the people of Het, the Hittites, respond? They'll give him one. In fact, more than one. They will say that you can bury as many dead people as you want, right? So the difference between dead and dead in English doesn't come through, but in the Hebrew, he asks for a place to bury his dead one, and they say, we'll give you a place to bury your deads, meaning any that you may need. But they're not offering to sell it to him, they're offering to give it to him. Because, hey, you know, we've all got family tombs, and if you want to bury any of your dead in our family tombs, that's fine.
But this is very nice because they also say to him, you are the elect of God among us.
Yes.
What God are they talking about?
Well, they're using the phrase of Elohim, which in biblical Hebrew can mean God, and it can mean gods, other gods. Now, it seems from context and from at least the tradition of our people that they are recognizing him as the elect of God, capital G-O-D, no plural. And they're saying, look, this is somebody who is special. We have seen time and time again things work out for him and his family in a way that, whoa, something's happening here. So by all means, go ahead and bury among our family tombs. So good offer, Is it what is it what he was asking for?
No.
No. What's missing between what he was asking for and what they're offering?
He wants a burial site of his own.
Purchase, ownership, right? He wants to own the place that he will bury his family. Now, and this may seem a little weird in modern conception because we're used to having cemeteries, giant areas that have numerous spots in them that are reserved for the burial of a loved one. But our familyness may consist of having a row of plots or just everybody being in the same cemetery, but there's no ownership per se of the entirety of the land. In the ancient world, that was not always that way. In the ancient world, a family would aspire to have a particular area set aside, not in a group cemetery, but in their own spot, their own set of land that was set aside for their burials of their family, for the generations that would come. So having distinct personal ownership of land as a place for your family was very much a sign of belonging to that place, of having that land in your possession, and of a commitment to a long-term presence in that land. What they've said is, look, you're a wonderful guy. We love you to pieces. Go ahead and use our family tombs. And we're going to see that that's not what he wants. He doesn't want to have his dead buried in their tombs. He wants his dead buried in his tomb. That will be for him, for his children, for his grandchildren, etc. See the difference? Okay, onward.
Thereupon, Abraham bowed low to the people of the land, the Hittites, and he said to them, "If it is your wish that I remove my dead for burial, you must agree to intercede for me with Ephron, son of Zohar. Let him sell me the cave of Machpelah that he owns, which is at the edge of his land. Let him sell it to me at the full price for a burial site in your midst."
All right, so notice he's talking about selling. Right? He's making it very clear that what he wants is not a gift, but what he wants is a purchase. He wants a legitimate claim to the land that will be undeniable by all the people that this is his. Make sense?
And this cave is at the edge of the guy's land. If it were in the middle, the guy would still might have some ownership.
Exactly.
Since
Well,
it's at the edge, you could sort of say it's taken away now and become Abraham's.
Exactly. No one's going to sell you a piece of land that's in the middle of their parcel of land. It's just not going to work out well for anyone. But it's on the edge. He's not even going to notice that it's gone, right? It's very easy for him to, cut it, sell it, and then it can be mine. Exactly. Just change the border on his property line a little bit. Make sense?
So far.
This is all happening around Hebron.
And this is all happening around Hebron. Exactly.
Ephron was present among the Hittites. So Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the Hittites,
That means it is being witnessed.
all who entered the gate of his town, saying, "No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury your dead."
All right, lovely bartering technique, right? No, what's a cave between us, right? Go ahead, have it, no problem.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
So tight.
Right, it's still a question of title, right? It's still a question of ownership. There's no transaction. It's still, he's letting me do it. And I don't want him to let me do it. I want him to acknowledge my right to do it, even if he were to later decide he didn't want me to do it. And that only comes by ownership. Right? Friendship works great when friends are being friends.
As long as you're friends.
Right. But when you've got a piece of paper, when you've got a title, when you have a witness of the entire community of who owns this piece of land, then even if friends aren't being friendly to each other, you can still do what you want to do with your property.
Then when you come to court, you could show the judge, "I actually own it."
Exactly.
Well, he told me so. And he says, "Well, I didn't tell him that." And you never know. You got it in writing. You stand in front of the judge.
And you got witnesses from the town.
Witnesses, got everything.
Exactly. And that's what Abraham is saying. And he's willing to pay for that. He's willing to pay, in fact, through the nose for this.
Then Abraham bowed low before the people of the land and spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying,
Again, remember, witness testimony is the only form of testimony that was the highest form of testimony in the ancient world. So the fact that this continues to repeat, that he is saying it in the hearing of everyone, that he is doing this in front of everyone, this is making sure that everyone who reads this text knows that this is universally acknowledged and accepted. This is the highest degree of public testimony possible. So carry on.
And he spoke to the people saying, if only you would hear me out. Let me pay the price of the land.
You're not listening.
Accept it from me that I may bury my dead there. And Ephron replied to Abraham, saying to him, my Lord, do hear me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver? What is that between you and me? Go and bury your dead. Abraham accepted Ephron's terms.
All right, so pause. Wait, what terms did he accept?
Money.
Right, the money. Again, classic bargaining technique. You know, what's that? It's worth like 400 shekels. What's that between us? Right? Go on, have it. And yes, technically Abraham might have been able to get away with just taking it at that point, but instead he was listening carefully and he heard 400 shekels. Standard barter technique, if you hear somebody say it's worth 400 shekels, you should make a counter offer, right?
Right.
Exactly, please. The guy says it's worth 400 shekels. The one thing you know is it's not worth 400 shekels. Right? The starting price is never the actual price.
Do we have any basis of comparison at all?
Maybe. That is to say, we do have other documents that have been unearthed through archaeology that do talk about land transactions and such. And then the way they describe its location, that seems very familiar to what the other documents would have said. The amount seems high.
Okay,
Seems very high. Now, exactly how high, it's hard to know because a shekel is not always a shekel.
Right.
And so they go out of the text goes out of its way to make sure we know the shekels were good shekels, but exactly how much that was worth, what its purchasing power overall was, we don't have a great yardstick. But what we can guess by the loosest estimation of what a shekel is that this was an exorbitant price for this piece of land, assuming that it was just a land with a cave in it, not a huge estate.
And it was a field in front of it too.
Right. Well, I mean, it's an area. Exactly. It would have been an area up against a hill with the cave going into it and using the cave as the burial chamber.
Abraham accepted Ephron's terms. Abraham paid out to Ephron the money that he had named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver at the going merchant's rate.
Right, so going merchant's rate is the attempt to try and understand what in the world that final Hebrew phrase means. What it basically seems to mean is the best form of the coins that were used at the time. I don't know if you're all familiar with the numismatic idiosyncrasies of the ancient world, but minting coins was quite difficult in the ancient world, and keeping the value of the coin was quite difficult in the ancient world. People could clip off corners, they could shave it down, they could do other things to steal some of the value of the money. This is basically saying, no, it wasn't 400 like shoddy shekels. This was 400 best shekels you could ever hope for, the creme de la creme of the shekel coin currency at the time. And notice he said 400, I am paying it. So now Ephron can't raise the price because he already mentioned 400 in front of everyone. He probably thought that Abraham was going to argue and bicker, and then maybe he could prevent him from buying it by never coming down from 400, because what idiot would pay 400? But apparently Abraham had no problem paying 400 for this piece of land, which again seems like an awful lot. It's almost as though Abraham had something else in mind. But we're going to come back to that.
So Ephron's land in Machpelah, near Mamre, the field with its cave and all the trees, anywhere within the confines of that field.
Sound like a good real estate document to you?
Yes,
Right?
passed to Abraham as his possession in the presence of the Hittites, of all who entered the gates of his town. And then Abraham.
By the way, doing this publicly also means that if somebody had had a lien against this field, it would have been revealed during this negotiation. And so this way, Abraham knows that what he's bought is free and clear. That whole, when someone has a debt that's being collateralized by someone else's field,
And then Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of the field of Machpelah, facing Mamre, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Thus the field with its cave passed from the Hittites to Abraham as a burial site.
Okay, so the phrase burial site is a bit limited. Good catch. It literally says achuzat kever, right? So burial site in English just means a burial place. An achuzah is a possession, right? It is something that has been seized, that is held. So it's not just a burial site, it is a burial estate. It is property that is held by the family. I mean, a burial site in English, that's just wherever you bury somebody. But this is talking about the establishment of a chain of ownership to this spot. Make sense? Okay. Hebron. Where is this now? Kiryat Arba? Hebron, right? It's still the same place. We have a very good long chain of tradition, an attribution of this location. Some of the biblical sites were a little sketchy of exactly where they are on the modern map of Israel. This one is easy. And the cave of Machpelah, well, we don't have a perfect testimony for this, but we've got a really, really old testimony for this, which is at least more than 2,000 years of where this site is, because there was a 2,000-year-old building sitting on the Machpelah, sitting on this cave. And if you were to go to modern-day Hebron, you would be able to see it quite distinctly. If you were to go to modern-day Hebron. Is that likely? No, not so much. Hebron is or depending upon how you count, one of the largest cities in the West Bank. And it is a fiercely contested piece of territory. That is to say that this is not an easy visit from across the Green Line into the West Bank to go visit Hebron. There are around 1,000 Jews who do live in the area, and they are under heavy protection, and indeed there are numerous terrorist attacks against them. But for the average person from Israel, or let alone a tourist, you're not going to Hebron anytime soon. And we're going to come back to that topic, but I want to make sure we understand the current reality of the spot. And this is where Abraham picked for his wife to be buried, and where later he gets buried, and where later still Isaac gets buried, and also Isaac's wife, Rebecca, and then Jacob and
Leah.
only Leah. Rachel is buried in a different tomb of her own.
Is Joseph there?
Joseph is not considered to be buried there. In fact, Joseph's tomb was just horribly burnt and defaced in a terrorist attack just recently.
It's the only place in Israel that we felt threatened.
At Joseph's tomb?
No,
Or-
in Hebron.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
When did you go?
We were there in 69.
Yes. Yeah, just after the 6-Day War.
No, we were there. Well, that first time was in 68. We
Right.
went there again in 69, and we were surrounded by Arabs
Mhm.
trying to sell us things and making threatening gestures.
Right.
Only place.
Yeah.
And we were in Arab villages.
Right.
We were in group. It was scary.
Hebron, as we're going to see, is a very unique spot in Jewish thought, and it is also a very, unfortunately, unique spot in the modern conflict in terms of the tensions that surround it. Okay, so let's talk about who's there and why and how. So we're on our top text here from Genesis Rabbah.
And he bought the parcel of ground where he had spread his tent for 100 pieces of money.
Go ahead.
Rav Yudan, son of Shimon, said, "This is one of the 3 places where the non-Jews cannot deceive the Jewish people by saying they stole it from them. And these are the places: Ma'arat HaMachpelah, the temple, and Joseph's burial place."
Right. So each of those 3 places, we have text within the Torah that says it was purchased from the people who have it. Now, what's this mean about that we cannot be accused of by saying that we had stolen it? What are they trying to say there? What does that say about the rest of Canaan, the rest of Israel?
Could be accused.
We could be accused, right? It's an honest assessment
We
that
wanted no more.
we say
Fought for it.
that God gave it to us, and then we came back after the Exodus, and we conquered the land. And there are those who could easily say, we don't believe in your God, so therefore your conquest was illegitimate. You coming back to the land after your hundreds of years of slavery, that we don't care, because that doesn't give you the right to the land, because we don't acknowledge your God as God. And therefore your God has no authority to give this land to you, therefore you taking it is illegitimate. But even for those people, which obviously the Midrash doesn't agree with, but even for those people who might say that we had no claim to the land, there are 3 spots in the land that they can't say that about. Machpelah, Joseph's tomb, and the Temple Mount. Those are the 3 places that they cannot say that about. And what's that? And interestingly enough,
We don't have those.
ironically enough, in the modern world, those are 3 places which are, especially Hebron and the Temple Mount, are 2 of the most hotly contested pieces of land in the entire land of Israel. And Joseph's tomb is no picnic either, as I just mentioned. It was also burnt. So yes, the irony is that what Midrash lists as the 3 undeniably Jewish-owned pieces of land are 3 things that are denied as being Jewish land by a large portion of the Middle East and big chunk of the world. Okay, but let's go ahead and get our proof texts out.
Ma'arat HaMachpelah, because it is written, and Abraham hearkened unto Ephron, and Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver.
Which we just read.
The temple, because it is written, so David gave to Ornan for the place.
Right, so in the book of Chronicles, it talks about David buying the spot where the temple would stand.
And Joseph's burial place, because it is written, and he bought the parcel of land.
Which is, exactly, go ahead.
Jacob bought Shechem.
Right, so that's the section that we just read, at the italics at the beginning of the paragraph. So these are the 3 places where there is an explicit statement of purchase of the land by the new Jewish owner. And yes, ironically, all 3 of these have become hotly contested in the modern world.
Interesting, of all places to get hotly contested, those.
Exactly. Yeah. Tel Aviv, Haifa, we don't have any record of us buying those in the Tanakh. Not that we should. But the 3 places that we have specifically records of us buying, those happen to be, especially the first 2, the most contested locations within the land of Israel.
So why does it say 100 pieces of money rather than 400?
It's different. This is Jacob.
Oh no,
bought
they
Shechem.
mean the italics. That's
That's
Jacob
Jacob.
purchasing the spot that becomes for
Oh.
Joseph's tomb. Yes. Okay. So, what happened to Hebron? Right. Remember, he gets buried there. Isaac and Rebekah get buried there. Jacob and Leah get buried there, and then we're stuck down in Egypt for hundreds of years. So what happens in the meantime? What happens when we return? Does Hebron just disappear from the map? Many places that Abraham visited and did stuff, they're no longer that central to the story later. Hebron, it's got a part to play, a rather important part in a couple ways.
And Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb, because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. Now, the name of Hebron used to be Kiryat Arba, for Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim.
All right. So here we get a little attribution from the Tanakh of why is it called Kiryat Arba. Remember at the very beginning it says Kiryat Arba, which is now called Hebron. Why was it called Kiryat Arba?
In honor of that man.
In honor of that man? Well, yes. So but what's an Anak?
The giant.
A giant. Right? So he was one of the last of the Anakim. He was one of the last of the giants. Think Goliath for comparison. And apparently his name was Arba. So this was the town of Arba, meaning this was the town of the giant called Arba. And so the town became named for him. Make sense? Maybe? Okay. Caleb? We remember good old Caleb?
Spies?
One of the spies. And what was Caleb and Joshua's unique claim to fame among the spies?
They said we could conquer the land, and the other 10 spies said, "Oh no, they are giants there. We'll never overcome them."
Okay, so going back to our giant metaphor here, right? Caleb and Joshua, when they saw the people of the land, they said, they're not giants, we can handle them. And so what does Caleb end up with? The town of the giant, right? Because he was the one who saw that that could be ours. And the other spies, the 10 that said no, they're the ones who convinced and swayed the entire people to reject God's command to go up into the land after we left Egypt, and got us stuck in the wilderness for 40 years. But Caleb was one of the people who said no. And in fact, Caleb and Joshua are the two guys who, even though they were over the 20-year-old threshold, lived to see the settlement of the land of Israel. And this is Caleb getting his reward. This is Caleb getting the payback for what he had done or what he tried to do at least when he went.
So the implication is that Abraham bought the land some time ago,
Mhm.
and it now passes through the generations through all the Jewish people.
Well, yeah, I mean,
to get to Caleb, because there's a lot of generations between Abraham and Caleb.
okay. So that then becomes the question. If Abraham had bought the land, and then it passes, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment, to his descendants, which is how you get Isaac and Jacob being buried there, as opposed to some other folks who might have thought they could be buried there, meaning Ishmael and Esau, the other brothers. How does it end up being available to be given to Caleb? Because all of the land that had been given to Abraham goes into the pot for the lottery system of dividing the land up among the tribes. And what's happening here is that Joshua is making an executive decision, which is supported by God, that this town is going to be granted to this guy. Even though all the other towns and territory are being doled out according to the lottery system, this is going as a special reward. Make sense? Okay. And why should it be such a special reward?
And Caleb went to Hebron alone and prostrated himself on the graves of the forefathers, that he would not be enticed to join his colleagues in their plan. This is what is stated in Deuteronomy. To him will I give the land that he has walked upon. And it is written in Judges, and they gave Hebron to Caleb.
All right, so you have to follow the logical bouncing ball of our sages as they come together. This is from Rashi based upon the Midrash. So if in the book of Judges it says that they gave Hebron to Caleb, because it gets repeated there in the book of Judges, and in Deuteronomy it says, I will give him, meaning Caleb, the ground that he walked on. If he ended up with Hebron, then what ground must he have walked on? It must have been Hebron, right? Because you can do it sort of backwards reading of the text. If he ended up with this, and he was promised what he walked on, then this must be what he walked on. But why would he have gone to Hebron of all places? Why would he have singled this out? What would he be doing in Hebron? Well, what else do we know about Hebron?
The graves.
It's the site of the patriarchs, of our ancestors, right? So he must have gone to Hebron specifically to visit at the graves of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and spouses.
Because he knew that the other guys were not looking favorably on the land. So he went to Abraham and said, look, I know God promised this land to you. I promise I'm staying with this.
But look at what he's saying specifically. What was he praying for?
What was he? That he wouldn't be joining his colleagues and saying, we
He
can't
wouldn't
go
give
in
in.
there. He wouldn't give in.
That he would go to this spot, again, as one of the undeniable spots of our people, and to the burial place of the people who had established us as a family that grew to a nation that had the covenant with God, and saying, please, Abraham, don't let me give in. Because I know that my colleagues, the spies, they want to back out. They're afraid they are going to go back and give a bad report. Don't let me follow the crowd. Give me strength, Abraham, right now. And because of that, that's why he ends up with Hebron. I mean, someone else made Hebron home in a very special way.
And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months.
So Hebron was a royal city. Hebron was the royal city of David. He grew up in Bethlehem, but Hebron became his royal capital, where he established himself before the conquest of Jerusalem, before Jerusalem became the centerpiece of the nation. So for 7.5 years, Hebron was the capital of our people, which seems, again, to be saying there's something really, really special about Hebron, that it keeps cropping up with Caleb, it crops up with King David. It was supposed to be just a place to bury people. What's going on here? And how did it end up that they would prize it so much as well? Well, let's see how our Midrash reads about Jacob and Esau on this.
When Isaac passed away, Jacob and Esau came to divide everything between them. Jacob said to himself, if we divide everything equally, why should this wicked man be entitled to be buried in the cave together with the righteous people there? What did he do?
Oh, no, we're going to reread
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. What did he do?
What did he do?
What did he do?
Meaning, what did Jacob do? But hold on. So what's Jacob's problem? He and his brother have come for his father's funeral.
Yeah.
It's time for the reading of the will.
And
And
Jacob wants nothing to do with Esau.
he wants nothing to do with Esau.
Oh, Jacob
and he
wants the
also,
inheritance.
well, of course, Jacob wants the inheritance, right? It's a good, normal inheritance, right? We are dividing the money. Remember, just because Jacob has the birthright doesn't mean he gets everything, right? Things are still divided. So he's worried about the right to be buried in the tomb. Remember, this is a possession, the afuzat kever. This is not just a burial plot somewhere. This is an ownership issue of who possesses the right to be buried in this tomb. And each of the boys would be given the right to be buried in the tomb in equal measure. And that is part of their inheritance, right? So the equivalent in modern world would be, imagine some grandfather buying 100 burial plots in a cemetery for the family. And then his two sons each get 50. And then each of their two sons get 25. Well, presuming some of them aren't being filled as we go along, but you get the idea. And what this is saying is that Jacob's going, wait a minute, so I'm going to get some of the burial rights and he's going to get some of the burial rights. And that means when I die, I'll be buried here. And when he dies, he's going to be buried here. My brother, Esau, we've talked about the portrayal of Esau in the text. He's going to get to be buried among Abraham and Isaac. Let me see if we can work something out.
Because at this point, Jacob's already living with his uncle Laban.
This is after that. He's already returned to the land. And
When
he's reconciled with his brother,
with Esau.
but he's keeping his distance.
Oh my.
Right? He's reconciled, but they're not exactly brotherly, but they're not trying to kill each other.
Okay.
But Esau was pretty open and with Jacob, wasn't he, when they reconciled?
When they reconciled, we had a surprise that Esau wasn't going to murder him.
Yeah,
And it was a pleasant reconciliation, but it wasn't a perfect reconciliation, depending upon how you read the text. And that's
Right, okay.
refer you to some of the earlier things we've gone over. But certainly in the eyes of the tradition, Esau was definitely not reformed. Even if he was resigned to not murdering his brother, he wasn't necessarily a great person in the rest of his life. Remember, he's traveling around with 400 armed guys. Not exactly a man of peace, most likely a man of not just war, but probably banditry. So Jacob's really uncomfortable about this. But he's not going to just deny Esau his birthright. He's not going to just take it away from him. He'll make an arrangement. Oh, Paul, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, yes, I don't know if this is a but or if it's just an observation, but it seems like just as Esau doesn't reform or evolve, neither does Jacob. In the sense that, right?
Yeah.
Jacob seemingly is incredibly aware that Esau is going to trade his birthright for a bowl of soup, right? And that in terms of
He knew his brother.
Right, he knew his brother, and he also then knew his brother that in terms of the graves, that Esau was gonna
That a deal might be made.
that a deal might be made that Esau would not understand the implications of.
Well, I'm not sure that we understand the implications yet, because we haven't turned the page yet. So let's see what Jacob
So
does.
what did Jacob do? Jacob took his share of the silver and gold, which he put into a bundle. He came to his brother Esau and said to him, "Brother, do you want your share in the cave or this bundle of silver and gold?
Or do you want what's behind door number 2?
And
Right?
it's silver and gold behind that door.
Exactly. So do you want a place to die, or to be buried when you die? This place in particular, or can I convince you that you give me your share of the cave and I'll give you my share of the money?
Esau replied, "I can find a burial place anywhere. Why should I lose all this money for this particular burial site?" He then took all the money and gave Jacob his share in the grave.
It makes kind of sense, doesn't it? I mean, there's plenty of places for me to be buried. So if he's hung up on this particular plot, sure, I'll take the money, he can take the plot, and with this much money, I can go buy any plot I feel like. So Esau, being the very practical person that he shows himself being, the very worldly person that he's shown himself to be, makes the obvious choice.
But also, I would not assume that Esau has much fondness for his father and his mother, because they abetted in the deception. The mother did.
His mother, certainly. His father, he always seemed to have a deep devotion to. And remember, we do know from the Torah, at least,
Yes.
that he does show up for the funeral.
Right.
So it's not as though he has completely distanced himself from his father. So we might have thought that he would want to be buried with his family.
But he gave up the birthright, and therefore, I think he felt he could give up any other
Exactly.
issues
So
with progeny.
consistently, he's shown that he's willing to sell his connection to the family for the right price. And that has been, however you want to interpret that has been his MO for most of his life. Now, we can say that other people took advantage of him. We can say that other people, elbowed him out of the way, or that he never really had a fair chance, da-da-da-da-da. But he also has shown that he's not terribly uncomfortable with that.
Right.
When Jacob comes back and he says, well, what about this whole I'm getting the land of Israel thing? And he's like, don't worry, I got the land over here. If he had had a passion for his family and his history and the covenant that God had made with Abraham, no other land would have sufficed. Right? He would have had to come to a conclusion and a cooperation with his brother, but he should not have been so easily placated by being given another chunk of land. And that's what the Midrash is playing off here. Is that why isn't Esau buried there? I bet Jacob bought him off like he bought him off for all the other stuff. And that means I bet Esau was somebody who could be bought off even though the value was greater than gold and silver. But he didn't see that value. And now they're going to give us the underpinning, the language of why they came up with this interpretation.
And this is what Jacob said to Joseph before his death. In my grave, which I had dug, kariti, for myself.
So at the very end of Genesis, when Jacob is about to die, he makes Joseph promise that he'll be buried in Machpelah rather than be buried in Egypt. And what, of course, is the obvious issue here? What do you mean you dug the grave? Your grandfather bought Machpelah. You didn't dig a grave for yourself.
Right.
So why use this weird language?
Yeah, and it doesn't say purchased.
Right. It didn't not like my grave I bought. It's my grave I dug. Why use that weird language?
He said to them, a bundle of kari.
A bundle, which means kari, or it said kari,
Yeah,
of
kari.
dinars. So I bundled for myself a grave.
And the word is the same as dug?
Exactly. Well, it's very, very
very
similar.
similar.
Yeah, it's similar enough to make the midrash work.
A bundle.
Right, a bundle of dinars that I gave Esau. Right, so I didn't dig it, I bundled it. Right, it was a special offer, a bundle deal. And so I got the grave for myself. So he's trying to figure out why, the Midrash is trying to figure out why is it that he says that he got the grave for himself in some manner? Because he didn't, he inherited it. And then they went, but would he have inherited it? Because what about Esau? And they said, well, I bet that he bundled it. And that means he must have made a trade. Okay. Why do we care about this piece of land? Why is Jacob willing to send this money? Why should Caleb have this as a prize? Why should David have made this a royal city? What is it about Hebron that makes it stand out? Let's begin to unravel.
Rabbi Huna said, before Abraham, there were many who wanted to be buried there, but could not enter the place because of a fire emanating from it. The fire was put there by the ministering angels who were guarding the place. When Abraham came, he entered and bought the place.
So, that's all clear, right? The cave had fire. The cave was, like, dragon type thing. I mean,
And angels too, so.
And there were angels that were creating a fiery wall. Well, remember, where else do we hear about a fiery wall?
With
The Garden of Eden, right? There's a cherub. I remember, don't think of cherubs as being fat little babies. There is a cherub guarding the entrance of the Garden of Eden with a flaming sword. Right? So the idea of an angel and fire as being a barrier, and a very particular type of barrier between our world and something else, is not unprecedented within Torah, and it's not unprecedented within rabbinic literature. So the idea here is that everybody knew there was something special about Machpelah, but no one else could get in. And Abraham could.
Was one of Abraham's tests had something to do with fire? The tests that he would
Ur Kasdim, when he
Yeah.
went through the furnace
Yes.
with Nimrod. Yes.
So he's already gone through fire before, so he can do this.
That's a good point. He has done fire before. But again, what is fire going to symbolize? And what is it that is really holding people back? Well, we have to unravel a little bit more about this.
Abraham had long known the value of this spot. Adam had chosen it for his burial place.
So
Himself. He
for
chose it.
Adam's own burial place, where is Adam buried? Machpelah, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron.
Because he had feared that his body might be used for idolatry.
That is to say, Adam's body might be used for idolatry. I mean, think about it. If people knew the bones of the first man, you don't think someone would put that in a shrine and make a lovely little temple around it?
Yeah. He had his body laid to rest in the depths of the cave so no one would find it. When he buried Eve there, he wanted to dig even deeper because he could smell the sweet scent of paradise. But a heavenly voice called out, "Enough."
All right, let's try and unpack a little bit of this. We're treading into other realms here, right? Is what's being described.
Yeah.
So he wanted to be buried here because he wanted to be away from the idea that he might become an idol, that his body would be worshipped in the world by the other people. And then he comes to bury Eve as well, and he can smell the sweet scent of paradise. What are they talking about? What's paradise? Eden, Gan Eden, right? So in the cave of Machpelah, as he's digging to put his wife to rest, he can smell Eden. He can remember Eden. Remember, he is the only person who's lived in both worlds, right? He is the one who lived in Eden and then lived out of Eden. And he remembers the smell of Eden. And there in Machpelah, as he's burying his wife, he can smell Eden again. And he is digging deeper and deeper, as though he can get to Eden by digging deeper and deeper, as though maybe with another shovel I will uncover it. Until a heavenly voice says, stop. Now the stop is kind of odd. What's the stop? Is the stop because you're getting too close? Or is it stop because what you're doing is inappropriate? And is this
Both.
It can be both.
You can't go back to Gan Eden. He was thrown out forever.
He can't go to Gan Eden in this world. Right? But what is the promise? That when you're dead, your spirit can. Right? That Gan Eden is the image that we use for the afterlife. Right? When we say El Malei Rachamim, we say that our loved ones will take their place in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden. Again, it's being used there and here as a metaphor for the perfect, sublime existence of the afterlife. You can't dig your way there. But when burying, we are aware of it. Right? When we lay our beloved to rest, we are aware that they are being transported to Gan Eden, but we can't be mistaken into thinking that the burial is the pathway to Gan Eden. It's not as if I bury somebody better, then I'm going to somehow, with my shovel, uncover the Garden of Eden. So burial is both a passage to Gan Eden and it is a non-passage to Gan Eden. As it is a passage for the soul, but it's not a passage for the shovel. Right? In the spiritual act of burial, absolutely it is the passage. In the physical act of digging, not so much. The digging needs to be done, but deeper doesn't make it better.
Yeah, the grave digger's not going to get there. The soul of the deceased is going to get
Exactly right. Exactly right. But Adam could smell paradise because he understood what was happening for the spirit of Eve. But he didn't understand that digging wasn't the cause. It wasn't the mechanism.
So, by implication, Adam and Eve ended up living in Hebron.
Adam and Eve would have been living at Hebron at the time of their death, at least, yes. Onward?
Adam was buried by his son Seth, And until the time of Abraham, it was guarded by angels who kept fires burning so none would dare to approach it.
All right, so
Right.
why would we want to keep people away?
So they don't make an idol out of
All
it.
right, so two reasons. One, we don't want to make an idol. Right? Remember, that was Adam's original fear, was that his body might become a source of idolatry. And two,
The scent of Eden.
the scent of Eden, right? This is not the path to Eden. People are going to be drawn here as though this is the path to Eden. And it's not, or at least it's not in the coarse way that somebody who sees the fire would understand or would feel. Right? The fire is the burial between this world and the next. And we often choose the wrong path to move between this world and the next. We often think we're going to get there by some shortcut, by digging, by worshiping the right idol, even by worshiping the graves of the dead. However, the same acts, that is to say, the same visiting of the tombs of our ancestors, the same acts of trying to seek the next world through this world, can be fruitful in the right hands or in the right way. And who exemplifies the right way to reach the next world in this world? Abraham. And we're going to see what the idea is as they uncover that. So go ahead and read about Abraham here.
It happened that on the day the angels came to visit Abraham to announce Isaac's birth, that he wanted to serve them meat. The ox ran away, and when Abraham followed it, he discovered it had entered the cave. There he saw Adam and Eve stretched out with candles burning at the head of their resting places, while a sweet smell permeated the air.
All right, so a lot there, and we're running out of time. So the angels come, he wants to serve them. All right, this is the whole Sarah laughing in the tent scene, for those that need the reminder. And the ox runs away, says the Midrash. So Abraham has to go get the ox, because he's got guests. And the ox has wandered in to the cave of Machpelah. Right, remember, he happens to see the angels when he is near Mamre, which, as we already read in our Torah reading, is near Hebron. So these are places that are near one another. What did he discover? Okay, what does that mean? What does that represent? And the candles burning for them.
A little mystical, isn't it?
It's more than a little mystical. Now this is heavy duty mystical.
Heavy duty.
Okay,
mystical.
so a candle represents, generally in mysticism, or a flame like this represents the soul of a person. So when it says that their candles are still there, it means that their souls are still existent. They still exist. And the sweet smell, of course, is meant to hearken us back to Gan Eden. And the idea is that their souls exist in paradise now. Their bodies are here, but their souls exist in paradise. How did Abraham discover this?
Following the ox.
And why was he going for the ox?
To feed the angels.
To feed the angels whom he thought were people, travelers. Through the act of hospitality, through the most basic act of serving a traveler, Abraham comes across one of the most mystical places and secrets of the universe. Not by meditating, right? Not by contemplation, but by the performance of this mitzvah. Right? That is the secret that opens up the gates of paradise. Many people think that the only way you get to have a share of the world to come or an understanding of the ineffable is to meditate deeply, to philosophize, to immerse yourself within pure thoughts and all of these things that are ascetic behaviors. Abraham comes to say, no, that if you want to reach the gates of paradise, go take care of the poor traveler. That opens the gates. That is what leads you to understand the eternity of the soul. That is what leads you to understand the reward of Olam Haba, of the world to come. And so when he recognizes that in this moment of realization in this cave, that he's not going to the fire to pray to them, but that he is encountering this moment of clarity, he realizes this is where he wants to be buried as well. This is what establishes Machpelah as this cornerstone, this linchpin of understanding that Gan Eden, eternity and the paradise of the spiritual ever after, comes through this world, comes through the dirt. That making any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do one last text.
Adam sat and pondered, and he said, "For I know that you will return me to die."
That you will return me to die. And at a meeting place of all,
At a meeting place of all living.
Mhm.
While I yet live, I will build a house outside Mount Moriah.
And that Mount Moriah, by the way, is the Temple Mount where the temple once stood.
He dug and built himself a house. Then he thought, these tablets, the 10 Commandments, which will be written by the hand of God, will chase away the waters of the Jordan River. My body was made by God's own hands and given a soul by him. After my death, my body and bones will be taken and be made into idolatry. Therefore, I will bury my casket deep under and inside the cave.
All right, so he sees himself as, Adam is seeing the future of humanity unfold, and he's seeing the different aspects. He's seeing the 10 Commandments come, which will divide the waters. He can see his own body, which was made by God, as becoming a form of idolatry, and so he is trying to figure out what to do. Much as this is continuing from what we just read. Therefore,
the cave is called the cave of the Machpelah, the multiple cave.
Right, kefula, to double, to multiply, is what's being used here from the Hebrew.
And there is where they are, Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. And for the same reason, it is called Kiryat Arba, the city of the four, because 4 couples were buried there.
Right, so this is using Arba not to be the name of a giant, but Arba to be the number 4, Arba. Right, so it's the city of the 4, and the 4 are, as we said, 3 of which we know very clearly from the Torah, and the 4th being Adam and Eve.
But it's interesting where Rabbi Eliezer and Zohar, he discovered there he saw Adam and Eve stretched out with candles burning at the head of their resting place.
Right.
And there it says they were buried deep.
Yes.
So did they rise up out of the earth for them to see?
Metaphorically, yes. I mean, the entire image here is one of a vision. And you can imagine Abraham stumbling into this cave
and having a vision
of the first people of spiritual substance, which is really what Adam and Eve were, the first people to hear and feel God's presence in the world. Whatever we believe about hominids and other proto-human sapiens and Neanderthals, Adam and Eve essentially are the first spiritual creatures that exist and that give rise to all the rest of us. And when Abraham walks through this cave looking for the cow in order to be hospitable to these poor travelers, he recognizes that their flame, their spirit is still alive, that spirituality is still there in what he is doing and what he is seeking and what he has encountered and begun to understand about God.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah. Why did he buy it right away?
Why did he buy it right away? I don't know. The Midrash doesn't go into that.
I think he knew he wanted this cave after this Midrash.
Yes, according to this Midrash, it was obviously that this was where he wanted to go. According to this Midrash, you can say, why would Ephron even sell it? Because obviously there was something mystical about this place with all the fire and whatnot. But again, as I've said many times, the Midrashim are usually not trying to tell us how to film the movie. They're trying to tell us what sense we should make of this encounter and what we should learn from it. And what they are learning from it is, why would Hebron be so special? What would Abraham be willing to pay this much for? What Jacob would be willing to pay for? What Jacob would be willing to have his family go through all the trouble of making sure he could be buried there when they had to leave Egypt and do it? Why would Caleb have had this singled out as the reward for himself? Why would David have made this his royal city until such time as Jerusalem could be secured? And the idea that it's there in Machpelah that we touch the most essential aspect of the soul of all humanity, and try to find through that our path to God, that begins to make some sense. That there is something there that can touch the soul and help us connect to God. Unfortunately, sometimes we dig too hard. Right? Sometimes, like Adam, we think that because we can sense this vision, because we can sense this importance, that we're going to achieve it by dirt. We're going to achieve it with a shovel. We're going to achieve it somehow in this physically stealing the secrets of eternity from the land. And that's not how it works. So there's a lot of discussion, obviously, that's been going on in Israel about the status of Hebron, about any final resolution of whether it will remain part of Israel, whether it will be handed back. Like I said, we're talking about if not the largest cities in the West Bank, and the largest city outside of Gaza among the Palestinians. Not exactly prime territory for keeping as part of Israel if there's going to be a return of any land.
Hatred there.
And virulent hatred. But
But we have burial places that are,
how would we give it up?
Thank you.
Well, and that's the tension. And what we see from the discussions about Har Habayit, the Temple Mount, from the desecration of Joseph's tombs, of Rachel's tomb, of the issues over Machpelah, is that the fire spreads too quickly and too easily on this topic, but we also can't forfeit our access to it. It's too important to let go, and it's too dangerous to hold on to as it's currently being held. And so ultimately the ideal would be, yes, if there is going to be peace, God willing, please, with people that actually want peace with us, obviously the whole city of Hebron cannot remain as part of the land of Israel. Again, this is only if we have people that are willing to make those deals and make those negotiations and live up to them. But access to Hebron can never be given up. We can't simply say, oh, it's yours now, we'll never step foot there again. And that's ultimately what this is meant to be. Ultimately, Hebron is meant to be a place where all of humanity can be in touch with the first humans, with Adam and Eve, and to see within them that spark of humanity and to see within each other that spark of humanity. It is not meant to be a divisive spot. It is not meant to be a site of idolatry where people are fighting over the building and over the land rather than fighting to gain the spirit that God has given within each of us. And yet that's exactly what's happened. It is incredibly tragic. And we can see why Hebron has been so important to our people for so long and why we must continue to fight for the right to be there. Even if the ownership issues are going to get cloudy, we have to make sure that everyone understands that Hebron is an integral part of our faith and an integral part of our people. And which flag is in the city hall is less important than making sure that we can still visit for the right reasons and to celebrate that vision that Abraham had that began the march of our people towards God and towards Sinai. And that's not an easy answer, and there's no easy solutions, and I'm sorry if anyone thought they were going to get one. It may not happen in our lifetime. It may not happen in the lifetime of our children or grandchildren. God willing, it could happen tomorrow. As I always say, it's very important to remember when we pray for peace, that there is no physical barrier to peace between us and the Palestinians. Right? We are not genetically predisposed to have war. We are not physically compelled to come into conflict with each other. There is no inevitability to the conflict. It is all possible to be reconciled as soon as we behave as brothers. Or if one side decides they'd rather have the gold and silver than the cave, that can resolve it too, as it did with Jacob and Esau. I'd prefer having brothers, but the resolution, the solutions are all our decisions and theirs, exactly. There is no inevitability to the conflict. So peace could break out at any moment. Please, take care.